session on spectrum. So we completed a poem, Nomen are Foreign, by James Kirkup, and the poem is an anti-war poem. It tells us about as we move further, we understand that the poem is about the world wars that the world witnessed, the horrifying world wars, that would be a better word. Now, it is beautifully written on the theme of humanity, and the poet asserts that no men are foreign. We are all brothers and sisters. We hardly realize that when we go on war, we hardly realize that we belong to the same species. So here, through the poem, he is making a universal appeal or a request to see one another as brothers and sisters, to remove this boundaries that differentiate us and separate us as different national or different people of different countries. Instead, let us all unite the whole world to unite. He wants the whole world to be united, and there should be only one country or one religion, and that is humanity, the religion being humanity and the country being the earth as such. And we have to recognize and we have to look upon our people as our own, the other human species as our own brothers and sisters. So that was about No Men Are Foreign, which warns the readers of the perils of separation. Now we will move on to the next poem, Death Fugue. Now, Death Fugue is a very touching poem written by Paul Celan. Now, Paul Celan is otherwise known as Paul Anschel. Paul Anschel is a person who writes under the pseudonym Paul Celan, and Paul Celan's poem Death Fugue, one of the most celebrated poems, that is about his childhood experiences of the horrifying Holocaust. So here again we come to the same theme that James Kirkup has left us with, and the theme is the horrors of World War. Now again, the theme is different. For James Kirkup, it was all about the separations that the war makes, and makes us look upon our brothers and sisters, the human species, as others or foreigners. But here it is different. The theme is about the horrors of Holocaust. We did discuss that also in the last class when we did No Men Are Foreign, but here it is more intense. We have to go into the depths of Nazism. We have to dig into the roots of history a little bit or a little more to understand and appreciate the poem. Remember, Paul Celan is in fact a surviving victim. His parents were shot in front of him. The horrors that he faced in these concentration camps is vividly portrayed in his poem. The poem, though it looks, there is a lot of repetition. The poem looks simple, but look at the repetitions that is there. It looks as though it gives us the sound, or it gives us the feeling of an impending danger. The danger or the smell of death. There is in his poem the smell of death that every Jew had to face during that time. Okay, so we can understand this poem only if you have understood, or if you understand in depth the horrors of Holocaust. You may have studied that in history lessons, but that is not enough actually, because we have almost forgotten. Now when we come to Nazism and Holocaust, when we use the word or the term Nazism and Holocaust, we have studied all these things, but we tend to have forgotten the horrors that the Jews had to face. So let's refresh our memory from history a little, so that you will understand what Paul Celan means, or through his poem you will understand every Jew's the pain, the agony, the fear that they had to live through. So it was not like, for the Jews, it was not like, meeting, or they were dying before their real death. They were dying several times before the real death. That's what we can say, because every doorbell is a sign that they would be dead soon. Every visit of a Nazi soldier means he is going to be killed soon. He or she is going to be brutally killed or brutally attacked. All right, so to understand that psychological impact, or the psychological impact it had on the Jews, we have to do a little bit of history. So I hope you are ready to listen, and you're patient enough to listen, because only if you listen will you be able to appreciate the poem. I wouldn't say that you will not understand the poem. If you don't understand history, you will not understand the poem. Of course, a poem you can understand as we would be studying in formalism. You don't have to look beyond. You just the words in the text is all that is needed to understand the poem. But I disagree with the formalists. I would say that every time when you look at a poem, if you understand more about the poet, if you understand more about the background in which he has written the poem, you understand in depth his poem, appreciate in depth his poem. All right, so let's begin. We'll just do a little bit of history, and then we will come to the poem. Okay, and only after that I will be speaking about, say, Paul Celan in detail. So the crimes that the Nazis committed were based on a system of beliefs and set of practices. Nazi ideology is something that is synonymous with Hitler. According to this, there is no equality between people. So again, as we said about what James Kirkup was trying to warn us, see, wars are always something that divides people. Here, the division that Hitler brought in was that people, there was no equality between people, but there is only something called racial hierarchy, a fanatic idea. In his view, or in the Nazi view, blonde, blue-eyed Nordic Germans, or the German Aryans, were at the top of racial hierarchy, and the Jews were considered as the one in the lowest rung. Now, they came to be regarded as anti-race, the arch enemies of the Aryans. All the other colored people were placed depending on their external features. So it's not just the Jews, but also other colored people. So according to Hitler, the Aryans were the supremost, the superior race. So he was trying to reiterate the ideas, the fanatic idea of stating that there is no equality and everything was based on racial hierarchy in which the Aryans were considered the supremost race, and the Jews were considered the lowest of the race, and the ones, that is the other colored people like Africans or dark skinned people, those with crooked nose, the features, external features, if they had different external features, if they were deformed, etc., they were placed in between that ladder. But the Jews were the ones who were at the lowest rung. Hitler's racism was borrowed from Darwin. See, Darwin had nothing to do with this, okay? Darwin only stated how, or the natural process or the evolution of human species. But it was or rather to say, he was trying to advocate the humans as the survival of the fittest, Darwin's survival of the fittest. But these ideas were used by the racist thinkers and other politicians who were racial or who was racist. They used this in a different light. Darwin never spoke of Darwin only said that it is always see, the human species as well as in the animal kingdom, it's all about the survival of the fittest. But this view was used by these racial and fanatic thinkers to justify their imperial rule over the people that they conquered. The Nazi argument was very simple. The strongest race would survive and the weakest one would perish. The Aryan race was the strongest. It had to retain its purity, become stronger, and they have to dominate the world. It was like rule the world. The Aryans must rule the world. In this context, Hitler brought in his kind of ideologies. Once in power, the Nazis began to implement their dream of creating an exclusive racial community of pure Germans by physically eliminating all those who were undesirable. Now, who are these undesirable ones? The ones in the lowest rung, the ones who were not Aryan. So they wanted a pure Aryan race. Others were all going to be physically eliminated. They're going to be killed. So these human beings were not even given the value of an animal. Now, they wanted only a society of pure and healthy Nordic Aryans. They alone were considered desirable, the Nordic Aryans. So this meant that even those Germans, even among the Germans, not all, you see, don't think that all the Germans were Nordic Aryans. Even among the Germans, those who were seen as impure, those who were abnormal, those who had deformalities, they were to be killed. They had no right to exist in a Nazi society. So under euthanasia program, see, I told you in the last class, euthanasia means mercy killing, where Hitler justified to the world, or not to the world, at least to others. I wouldn't say to the world, because all this crime, as we move on, we'll understand what was happening here. I'll tell you what happened, how the world came to know about this Holocaust. Everything was kept a secret from the world, because see, the World War was going on. Second World War in the Second World War was going on, and it is under the shadow of this World War that this heinous crime, this terrible crime was happening, and not a word was kept or was known to the outer world. Nobody else knew it. Only the Germans knew it, and only within Germany. And people, the Germans, the Aryans, were made to think that they were so powerful that some were silent onlookers, some, according to them, they believed on all these things. They were mentally, made to believe that they were superior race, and all the Jews and these other people of not belonging to the Aryan race were to be eliminated. They started thinking, so everything was kept a secret. And therefore, the euthanasia program, euthanasia means mercy killing. So under the euthanasia program, they condemned, the Nazi government condemned to death many Germans who were considered mentally or physically unfit. The Jews were not only the community that were classified undesirables, the gypsies were also considered undesirables. They were like the blacks and the gypsies living in Nazi Germany were considered racial inferiors. They were widely persecuted. So therefore, no reason at all, just because they belonged or they were gypsies, they are not of the Aryan blood, you should be killed. Just imagine a thought. The same is the thing that is happening to our Dalits also, right? All this crime that is happening against the Dalits, just because they are born to a Dalit community, it means that they should be eliminated. The others, the upper class, consider them as impure. After all these are social constructs. Nobody is born a Dalit, nobody is born of a inferior society or inferior community or race, right? All these are constructs. So even here, it was all about his pseudo-beliefs, Hitler's pseudo-beliefs of considering the Aryans as superior race. All these are social constructs actually. And here he was trying to build on that construct and thereby do crimes and make people understand that what he's doing is good, is for the good. Now, so they were widely persecuted. So many people, Jews and also the gypsies, the blacks and the others who were racially inferior, who threatened the biological purity of the superior Aryan race, they were all persecuted. They were killed. The Jews were the most or the worst sufferers in Nazi Germany. Nazis' hatred of the Jews had one thing. They had a precursor in the traditional Christian hostility towards them, because they are considered as, or they are stereotyped as killers of Christ, and they are considered, they are the ones who killed Christ. There's a hostility between the Jews and the Christians, but this is not about Christianity at all. In fact, it has nothing to do with that. It's based on this kind of ideology that the Jews had to face a lot of problems after Christian mass Christian conversion. The Jews had to face a lot of problems. They were barred from owning lands. They survived mainly on trade and money lending, and they became rich, of course. But here, Hitler's hatred of Jews was based on the pseudo-scientific theory of race. His pseudo-scientific theory, his false scientific theory of race, which held that conversion was no solution to Jewish problem. So even if the Jews got converted, there is no point, because that blood is impure. That's what he believed. He believed in the Aryan race, okay, and that Aryan race cannot. It has nothing to do with, you have to be born an Aryan. You cannot get converted. So it can be solved, according to Hitler, this problem can be solved only through total elimination. That is, anybody who is not born to the Aryan community or the Aryan race is to be killed. Whether he's innocent, whether he's good, whether he's nice, that is not concerned here. As long as you are born to the Aryan race, you will live. If not, you are to be eliminated. So, see, under the shadow of the war, the Nazis proceeded to realize this murderous and racial ideal. Genocide and war became two sides of the same coin. And Poland was affected. It was divided. The Poles were forced to leave their homes and property behind to be occupied by the ethnic Germans. The Poles were then herded like cattle in other parts of the general government. The destination of all undesirables of the empire. And what happened was the Polish children who looked like Aryans were forcibly, see, those I said, it's all based on how you look. If you are a Jew, of course, you are going to be killed. Now the Poles, these people, when they attacked this Poland, and the Poles were forced to leave that place, many of them who were sent to the concentration camps, those people, among the Polish people, those who looked like Aryans, whose features looked like Aryans, those children who looked like Aryans, they were forcibly snatched from their mothers and examined by race experts. If they passed the race tests, that is, if they had the features, again, race experiments, race experts, you don't know what these people are doing and how they are going to prove whether they are Aryans or not. Anyway, if the child passes this race test, then they will be adopted by other Aryan families, the rich German Aryan families, and if not, they would be deposited in orphanages where they almost perished, or in fact they were killed or starved to death. But some of the largest ghettos, now ghettos are those, you may have studied that in history. Ghettos are those places where Jews were put. And the gas chambers, these ghettos and gas chambers served as killing fields for the Jews. It's just like a slaughterhouse where there is a mass killing happening. Now I'll share few pictures of how these Nazis ideologies, they tried to propagate, or they tried to bring in hatred for the Jews in the minds of others. How a few posters, many posters were put, and the gas chambers and how they were killed, the photographs of horrors. You will find piles of clothes before they were forced into the gas chambers. You will find piles of clothes outside the gas chambers. You will find shoes, in that were taken away from the prisoners before they entered the final solution. Final solution, again, see the word final solution, euthanasia, all these are words that were given for killing, for murder, to justify that they were doing something good by eliminating impure race. This man was, he believed in all these pseudo things, and he brought in, or he can be considered next to Whom? Lucifer, the man who walked and stalked so many people. Anyway, now how did this come out? All this was hidden from the world outside. The world did not get to know any of these crimes until the war was over. Many Nazis, they have written about this. The whole world got to know it through several memoirs, several diary entries, several things that were hidden inside. Information about the Nazi practices had trickled out of Germany during the last years of war. ഏറ്റവും അവസാനം വാറിൻ്റെ സെക്കൻഡ് വേൾഡ് വാർ അവസാനിക്കാറായ സമയത്താണ് ഇതിനെ പറ്റിയിട്ടുള്ള കുറച്ച് ഇൻഫർമേഷൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ടഡ് ലീക്കിംഗ് ഔട്ട് ടു ദി വേൾഡ്. But it was only after the war, the world came to know of it, but only in the last few years, last few years of the war. But the horrors it was only after the war ended and Germany was defeated that the world came to realize of the horrors that happened in the war. We try to see, we know about the bombardment that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the Americans. The Americans were not involved in the war in the beginning. They stayed out of the war in the Second World War because the First World War itself, they incurred a big loss and therefore they said we are not in it. But then what happened was Germany was attacking and half of Europe was in their when Hitler came to power. In the First World War, Germany lost, but in the Second World War, Germany became very strong under Hitler, and it was like conquering half of the Eastern Europe. And Japan took the side of Germany. They sided Germany, and they were occupying the French occupations or the French occupied colonies and the Indo-China area and all. And that is when America came they were forced to take part because Japan had bombarded the US Pearl Harbor. That was when the Americans, they said, okay, that's it. That's enough. Enough is enough. So they waged forward and they dropped the atom bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But you must also understand that this was not only one incident. There were many other more horrifying incidents that happened than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I want you to Google and search and you will find that out. Okay, that war or those destructions that were more severe than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anyway, as I was telling you, when America came into fight, then these people actually they became very strong. The powers they became very strong, and it was after the war ended that this horrors of the Holocaust was found. The Jews wanted the world to remember the atrocities and sufferings that they endured during the Nazi killing operations, also which was referred to as the Holocaust. Nazi killing operation is referred to as the Holocaust. So there is even there is a very interesting anecdote of a person a person who was in the ghettos were the ones where Jews stayed. And these ghettos in the Nazi regime, these ghettos were synonymous with sheds, or these were synonymous with killing chambers also. Like, they were starved to death. There is nothing to eat. There would be dead bodies in each ghettos because they are starved. They have no food. They have to work at the same, and they are starved to death, purposefully starved to death because they are Jews. Okay, so these ghettos, an inhabitant, a person living in this ghetto, he said, it's a very interesting anecdote. He said, I want to live at least half an hour. I want to outlive the war just for half an hour. What does that mean? Presumably, what he meant was, he wanted to tell, he would be able to tell the whole world what happened in the Nazi Germany. Because this Holocaust, that is the Nazi killing of the Jews, was kept a secret from the world. So they were doing all this under the shadow of war. They came to power. Hitler's rise to power had two things in mind. One, to occupy the whole of Europe, to become the conqueror of the world, to rule the world, to make the whole world an Aryan race. Second thing, eliminate all those who are not Aryans. So it was all based on his pseudo scientific ideology. All right. So the horrors that these people had to face, they were starved to death, they were put in chambers, gas chambers, they were gassed, and these gas, they would die instantly. Many women were raped because they were Jews, or they belonged to the inferior race. Children were snatched from their parents, or if they had Aryan features. If they were Jews, they would be mercilessly slaughtered, they would be mercilessly killed. Some were put in gas chambers, some were killed violently. And it was like entering a slaughterhouse where humans are killed because they don't belong to a particular race. All right. Now that's with the history of Holocaust. Now we'll come to death feuds. Now, who is Paul Celan? And why did I tell you about Paul, or all this about the Holocaust? Well, Paul Celan was was born in Romania to a German-speaking Jewish family. So Paul Celan is a Jew, and he was born on 23rd December 1920. During his childhood, he learned Hebrew from his father. His father was a Zionist, and his mother was he had a German mother. Now he went to study medicine, but he did not complete it because of the outbreak of the Second World War. And Celan's most turbulent phase during this war was when his parents, his relatives, and his friends were deported to a Nazi concentration camp, where his father was most likely, he died of typhus, and his mother was killed. She was shot to death, or she was killed because she was unable to work, those undesirables. Now, and he was subject to forced labor in another camp after, and he tried his level best to keep himself alive, and finally he escaped to the Red Army, and that's how he gets to Paris. So after the war, Celan settles in Paris, and he starts writing literature. He becomes a German teacher, a teacher of German languages, he becomes a German teacher, and his first collection of poems, The Sands from the Urns, written in German, was published. It was in the same year that his most anthologized poem, Death Fugue, was written. All right. His publication of Poppy and Memory in 1952 brought him international fame. Poppy and Memory, 1952. All right. He, however, suffered from depression for a long time, probably because of these things that affected him during his childhood, that he sees his father die of disease, and his mother was shot or killed because she was unable to work, and many of his relatives and friends were put in the concentration camps. Many of them died. All these sufferings that he saw as a child made him melancholic, very depressed. So he takes his own life. He suicides by drowning in the river, and in 1970. Okay, so that is with the introduction. Now, what is Holocaust? Holocaust literally means sacrifice by fire. It's also referred to as the killing of regime of the Nazis, and it was one of the depressing events of the world history. Also, it is known under various names. Shoah, it was a systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. Adolf Hitler, the Nazi leader who came to power in Germany in January 1933, believed that the minorities like racially inferior Jews, Gypsies, the Slavics, the physically disabled, the homosexuals, and the communists were all alien, or they were all threat to the so-called German superior racial community. Now, if you look at the literature of the period, you will find themes on Holocaust, and this poem is no different, but you will find the real saddening, the tone of death lurking at your death's doorstep through in this poem. Death Fugue was originally written in Romanian in 1944, and it attained its final form in 1945. It was translated to German in 1948 and is an example of Holocaust poetry. And it is inspired by his own experience in the camps and the histories of places that he describes especially the concentration camps. He speaks, especially it is about the concentration camp in Auschwitz. Auschwitz is a concentration camp is where the Nazi Germany's occupied Poland, where that place where they occupied the occupied Poland by the Nazi Germany, and Auschwitz was a concentration camp, a main concentration camp in that area. Now, he speaks about the horrors of this concentration camp that he saw. It is based on his memory, okay, that this poem is written. So we can feel the horrors of Holocaust, the horrors of death, in fact, lurking at the doorstep. All right. So we will begin the poem in the next video. Till then, thank you and keep safe.